So greetings from Pennsylvania once again. You can tell by the title of the video, it's time for another French and Indian War video, because we have been working on the Forbes expedition. We did part 1 and part 2 of that, and I will be doing part 3 here in a little bit, hopefully making our way out to Fort Ligonier and Pittsburgh, where Fort Duquesne was, but not today. This is the day after Thanksgiving, so I'm just kind of in my home area again. Yeah, if you remember some of the original videos we made not the original, but some of the first videos we made in this series dealing with the forts here on the eastern side of the Susquehanna River. Because just up behind me is the Blue Mountain, which was kind of the frontier zone between where the settlers were and what would be considered Indian country. And during the French and Indian War, the natives often used that mountain range, or the gaps in that mountain range, as a way to come through and do their raids on this territory. And there were a number of forts along that mountain chain, if you remember. And just up beyond those hills is the Blue Mountain. And up that way is a gap in the mountains called Indiantown Gap. And if we continue on down that way is what's referred to as Swatara Gap. I should mention, even back beyond Indiantown Gap going this way is another one called Monada Gap. And usually at those gaps is where they would build those forts. So that was a convenient place, like I said, for the Native Americans to come through and do their attacks. And most of those gaps had a fort built at them. You know, Swatara Gap had Fort Swatara. We visited that location. Manada Gap had Fort Manada. But for some reason, there was not an official fort here at Indiantown Gap. But there were some of those non-official forts that were built by the private citizens here that were not garrisoned by, colonial soldiers. Oftentimes they were just referred to as houses of refuge as well. Usually it was just someone's home that was kind of fortified as a place for everybody to come in and defend themselves against the attacks. And that's what some of the places we're going to look at today, that's what those places, that's what they were. So I think I'll throw a map up first showing the general area of where we are. Just up here is Harper's Tavern, and up there is, like I said, is the Indiantown Gap. So I'll go ahead and show that now. So what's the plan for this video then? Well, we're going to talk about Reed's Fort, which is one of those private forts that was built. It's not like there's not an official fort built by the colonial government of Pennsylvania. We'll try to find the historical marker for it, which is right along Route 22 up here, and they'll point out the general location of where it was. I think there's a road called Reed's Creek Road, and that's what Reed's Fort was named after, or the people who owned the land as well. And then we'll stop by Harper's Tavern. The tavern that's there was built in 1804, but I believe there were much older structures. The family that built that place, they owned land here back earlier, like about 1740, I believe. So they had one of the most furthest outposts in this area. Remember at that time, this was like pioneer country here. And supposedly, from some of the maps they showed, there was another fort out that way too. Sometimes it was just called Harper's Fort, or some sources call it just the Indian Fort. I don't know if there's any official marker for it anymore, but I'll point it out on the map where some people believe it was. So we'll take a look at where Reed's Fort was. We'll stop at Harper's Tavern. And then there's another place of interest along here called the Caves of Refuge, or sometimes the Caverns of Refuge. I'll point out where I believe they were. I believe they're more that way towards what's called Yorty's Bridge Road. It was a place where during a lot of the Indian attacks during that time, a lot of the settlers would hide in those caves that were along the Swatara Creek here behind me. I'll show that to you in a moment. And they used those places as a refuge. And I've read accounts where people went looking for those caves, never could find anything. So they may not even be there anymore, just because from floods from the creek, washing them out or filling them in with sediments and stuff like that. So down here is the Swatara Creek. Harper's Tavern is just up there. Kind of actually behind that hill up there. And the Caves of Refuge would be down probably quite a ways down that way. Like I said, I'm gonna go ahead and throw a map up of all those locations I plan to at least try to get to today. I'm not gonna be searching for those caves today. Maybe one of these days we'll get the kayak out and try to take a better look at that area, but that won't be today. I'll probably try to stop at a place that's close to them though. Alright, so let's get going in. Try and check these places out as best we can. And then I might have a story or two to tell you along the way. One's a little gruesome, but they're part of the history though. All right, let's go see if we can find that historical sign for Reed's Fort. All right, so let's make our way back to the main road up here. This is the Jonestown Road up here. This little pull off here is just for a place for kayakers to get in and out. But we're gonna, before we get to the historical marker for Reed's Fort, we're gonna get to the actual, roughly where the location of it was first, then we'll get to the historical marker. Yeah, so we're actually not far at all from where Reed's Fort was. It's just gonna be up this way. We're looking for Reed's Creek Road up here. That's where we'll turn. All right, so this is Reed's Creek Road. And I believe just up in here is where the fort was. There's a farm up here. This is one of these places they don't remember because they don't know exactly where this spot was, but I think it was out somewhere up here, up in this field, I believe is where it was, just before this farm. Yeah, because right there is route. You can see the highway traffic from Route 22. Yeah, somewhere over in there, I believe, is where it was. All right, let's get to that historical marker then. Because right up here is Route 22 then. Yeah, so right here is the historical marker then, right along this busy highway. Which we were just, right there's the farm we passed earlier. We came up Reed's Road to here. So just down in there is where the fort was. Let's read the sign here though. Reed's Fort, just south of this point, stood the house of Adam Reed. In 1755, it was turned into a fort. Here with rangers from Hanover Township, Reed protected the people of the countryside against the Indian raids. Yeah, right up there is the blue mountain that we were talking about earlier. You can see it popping up just above the field. And over there, I believe that's the Indiantown Gap right there. If you can see that there's a gap in the mountain right there. That's the Indiantown Gap. That's where the Native Americans have come through to attack this area. And of course, right down somewhere there was Reed's Fort. And it was in this area that one of the massacres occurred. I don't know if this one has a name, but about 5 or 6 people were killed in this particular massacre, which is one of the reasons why they built these forts. And they were all scalped, but one of them, a woman, actually survived the attack, survived being scalped, and she lived. It's a pretty gruesome thing. If you have the time and you want to look it up, look up what scalping involves and how they take your scalp off. But I've seen pictures of other people that have survived. In fact, I just saw one. Sorry, it's getting windy out here. I just saw one this morning of someone who survived back in the 1890s, but it's pretty gruesome. All right, let's go head over to Harper's Tavern. Maybe get a little less windy there. All right, so let's make our way back to Harper's Tavern area, just down the road from where we were earlier. We'll take a look at the building. This building was built in 1804, but remember that family was there way back in 1740, like I said, and they had one of the first outposts in this area. You can think of it that way. Like I said, I believe there was another fort nearby, sometimes like I seen on some maps, called Harper's Fort. I showed it on the map that I put up earlier, but I'll try to point it out when we're at Harper's Tavern. So here is the sign for it. It is still open today. Take a look at it from the back side quick. I think there's a lot of people here eating and stuff, but here's the back side of it. You can see it right there. Try to go out front. Yes, it's since 1804 in the front there. It's right over here is the Tavern. Right where that bridge is, that's the Sotara Creek. Reed's Fort, where we were, is back up that way. Here's another look at the Tavern from the front. Nice old brick building. Yeah, and somewhere out that way is where, sorry it's busy here, was where the other fort was perhaps, Harper's Fort they call it. Yeah, so lots of traffic here, pretty busy place, a little quieter just to film here in the Jeep. But yeah, that's Harper's Tavern. Never actually eaten there myself, but from what I can tell, it seems like a cool place to eat. Maybe I should try that sometime. Maybe me and my friend John will come here and eat sometime. Yeah, so this area was important even back in the French and Indian War in the 1750s. There were people in this area, the settlers and stuff. All right, so I think we'll head roughly to where the location of the Caves of Refuge is. That location is up for debate, but from what I can tell from looking at some of the maps and descriptions, I think I kind of know maybe where they were. So we're gonna head back towards the area of Reed's Fort to a road that's called Yorty's Bridge Road. Let's go there now. All right, so just off to our left again is where Reed's Fort was located. There's a sign for Reed's Creek Road. We drove up to that earlier, but now we're gonna keep our eyes open for Yorty's Bridge Road. We'll try and get as close as we can roughly to where perhaps those Caves of Refuge were located. Like I said, we're not gonna go looking for them today, but something we'll have to keep in mind for a later video. Kayak down to Swatara Creek and see what we can find. Like I say, I've read articles of other people going looking for them. They didn't really find anything. One person kind of found something sort of, but it seemed like it had been filled in with sediment over the years from the creek overflowing. I believe this is it right here, Yorty's Bridge. Yeah, this is it. So we'll go down this way. And then just down the way again here will be Swatara Creek. And there's a bridge that goes across it. That's why it's called Yorty's Bridge Road. Should just be up ahead. Yeah. I'm not sure if we can find a place to pull off or not here. I believe there's a lane right there. And then right here is the bridge. It's just a long one-lane bridge. Down here is the Swatara Creek. Of course, we were over that way earlier. Back that way is Harper's Tavern. Like I said, Reed's Fort is back up that way. Up there's the Blue Mountain Indian Town Gap. I believe down this way is where the Caves of Refuge were located. Down, the creek makes a little bend down that way. I think that's as close as we're gonna get. This land is all posted over here, so maybe if you could kayak down there sometime, down that way. Yeah, so picture that, having to hide in caves and stuff to hide from attacks from the Indians coming through that gap in the mountain back there. That's why they had to build these forts. Like I said, I'm not sure why they didn't build like an official colonial fort in this area. They did at all the other gaps. They built like an official fort for the soldiers to stay at so they could guard these gaps. But they didn't build one here at Indian Town Gap. I'm not sure why. But because they didn't have an official fort here to protect the people, that's why you had some of the private citizens build these other forts, like Reed's Fort and perhaps that other one I mentioned at Harper's Fort, which, like I said, some people debate whether that one existed or not. It's kind of hard to know. This is going back to the 1750s and there's nothing left of most of these places. All right, but yeah, picture that. Hiding in caves along the creek to protect yourself and your family. All right. But I think that'll be it for this video. I got to stop at a few places more local to me regarding the French and Indian War. There's more places in this area and all along. I mean, there's so many places I haven't filmed yet for the French and Indian War, smaller spots like this that we can still do at times. We'll see. But I'm still doing the major stuff too. Like I still have the last part of my Forbes expedition to film. I want to film the French forts out in western Pennsylvania too. There's Fort Presque Isle, Fort Le Boeuf, and Fort Machault. They're all north of Pittsburgh. I want to get to those sometime soon too. Then we have to do Pontiac's War, which occurred just after the French and Indian War. I'll probably include that in this series. Just one last look looking down that way. Definitely something we could do maybe in the spring. See if there's anything, because there's raised elevation up there, so it may be a good place for caves or caverns, if there's anything left at all. But that'll be it for this video then, folks. Thanks for coming along, and hopefully we'll see you on the next one. Thanks for watching.